Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today I want to further demonstrate how I paint wet on dry and to show you the approach and how you don't have to pre-wet anything in order to get a beautiful, realistic result. We'll also be using a lot of the Lebenzon brushes by Tracy Lebenzon. I definitely recommend you check these out. I will put a coupon code below for 20% off, so be sure to check that out. Let's get to it. So in continuation with that last video talking about wet on dry instead of wet and wet, I want to show you a bit more of how to actually do this, the technique, and I'll try elaborating as much as I can. We're going to do one small painting and then a bit of a larger one. The smaller one will be black and white, and the larger one will be full color. And I think it will be fun, and I wanted to also show you the drawing process because it's fairly quick. I know some people skip it, but here it's so quick that it's worth showing you. So the light comes basically from that direction, and what happens here, it's interesting, there's a shadow on this side because it's dented inwards, but then there's a shadow on this side. Okay, so it's something to have in mind. There's a beautiful highlight here. I want to show you how I build a drawing up so that you can maybe learn how to do that too. And you see I don't see the bottom of the apple here, and that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna improvise. So for the smaller version, again, I'm gonna do it black and white. And you see a very basic drawing, but it tells us everything we need to know: where the light is, where the shadow is, where the highlights are, and just a very effective way of portraying everything. Now I'm gonna veer on the side of going too light, and actually let me just bring this a little here. I'm gonna get closer on the apple, and why not, I'll just bring the palette over the paper. So I'm gonna go a little lighter, as I said, veer on the side of caution. Now we'll get started with the top, and again, the key here is we're not doing any wet and wet, okay? We're placing different values one next to another, okay? So we'll get started with, and this is the mid value, kind of in between. Now you could cover the area in the shadow here, but what I'll do is really put in the right value in every place. So if I go over the mid value here, I'm gonna start mixing a bit of a darker black, and I'll already put it within the shadowy area, okay? And I'm gonna try not to be robotic about it. The way I like to do it is really kind of fill in the different areas with what I feel like is the right value, and trying not to treat this as a coloring book per se, even though it's a similar approach, but don't mistake it for really like painting like a coloring book, because it's not. Now you'll see there is a beautiful shadow coming from the stem around this kind of a shape here. So that's important. I will blend that top edge right around here because it is a rounded shape, okay? And we have to remember that it is quite round. And I can already start giving the stem itself some value, but I'm gonna leave this thin strip here of light. This should reach all the way to the stem. And then I can start blending the edges around these highlights here because they're, again, not sharp. And that's pretty important. And then once we go there, we can start putting in the values we see. So funny enough, we have a pretty dark shadow here around the lower section. And you see I'm doing wet on dry again. So this is a dark shadow, but then as we reach the left side, we do have a darker section, but it's not as dark as the shadow on the right side, okay? And let's round it up here. Close off this gap. I'm gonna work on the highlights later, okay? I'm gonna improve them. And then I believe we should have a darker shadow cast by the apple, okay? So here we go. Now, a couple of things to have in mind while this is still wet. Notice we have quite a lot of reflected light on the apple, reflected by a different object in the scene. So I dry the brush, and I'm just gonna lift a bit of it back, okay? And this kind of a thing is important if you want to really portray things as you see them. Let's fix this here, round it a bit. So try and get those things accurately. Now here's the thing. It's not like I'm not using wet and wet at all. My initial approach is to do wet on dry, but then I'm free to continue applying wet and wet in the areas where I need to darken. Okay, or if I need to lift, so it's kind of the reverse of wet and wet. I'm lightening instead of darkening. So it's not like I didn't forbid anyone from using wet and wet. It's all about the circumstances, you see. And I really like how this turned out. I do feel like this highlight should be lifted a bit. So I'm gonna try grabbing a bit of toilet paper here. And I'm gonna try lightening it up, and if that doesn't work, that's fine. I have a brush that's more suitable for lifting, but we're not gonna spend too much time on this particular apple because I want to move on to the colorful one and show you how I do the exact same thing, okay, only with colors. So something like that. Now once it dries, and I'm not gonna wait, I'm just gonna do it, you can add that cast shadow by the stem that goes all the way around and really hints at the shape of the apple. So that's a nice little effect, okay? So it casts the shadow to the left. I want to show you another attempt I did earlier that turned out quite nicely, if I can find it. Here it is. So I like this one too. I think leaving this part lighter was a big thing, and here I didn't really manage to do that, so that had quite a significant influence. But maybe we can fix that for the next one, the colorful version. So here we go for the second example. I'm gonna draw it the exact same way. So first let's get that rounded shape. Now I'm gonna use a different set of brushes for this one that I've been really looking forward to diving deeper on. It's gonna be Lebenzon brushes by Tracy Lebenzon, and I will share a link below, and you can get a discount code. Coupon code. It's just Liron, and you get 20% off. So I highly recommend you check them out. And I'm gonna do this apple kind of like that. I'm going around here. We're gonna do a bit of a better job, hopefully preserving this highlight this time and this highlight, okay? And the rest will kind of take care of itself. Now, if you want to go one step further, you can actually indicate where the light and shadow is if it helps you to better see it. But you don't have to, okay? It's just kind of an extra measure. So I'm gonna get started. Most of these brushes I did try already, so I'm familiar with them, but some are gonna be a first for me, so I'm very excited to try them out. Let's get to it. So again, I'm gonna start with that kind of a mid value, and I wanna show you how also working with the brush is important. You wanna be able to learn its shape and how it kind of handles itself and use that to your advantage, okay? And I forgot I was supposed to do this one in color. Let me go ahead and correct that. I'm just gonna add some yellow on top of this. Maybe I can even lift everything and just restart. Okay, so just to show you, nothing's really the end of the road if you know how to fix it. So I'm gonna continue here with this kind of a mid to light value. It's pretty light again, and the yellow is it's not gonna go dark very easily, so you're good. And I'm gonna paint my way around the highlights like that. I do plan on doing a full video where I show the brushes more in action, which is gonna be fun, where I'll show like all of them and kind of show you how I get accustomed to different types of brushes and getting to know their range and their kind of motion, and you see I love that tip. I love that the tip adds a lot of variety to the kind of shape I get. That's really cool, and it's a fun way to figure out if you can again use it to your advantage to get some unique shapes, which is why I love the calligraphy brushes too. I find them more challenging. This is a bit of a kind of an in-between. Let's try another one just out of curiosity, but in any case this is kind of an in-between. But the calligraphy brushes, which I find very challenging, I also really enjoy that aspect of them, that they kind of let you use them in a multitude of different ways, so that's fun. So I'm gonna move over to this area that's slightly darker. We'll use my all of this focus on the colors, and I have to remember the flow. So here we need a bit of a darker value, right? And again, when you're working larger, this kind of a speed thing will become a little more important, of course. Let's mix it here. And on purpose, I skipped kind of a layer. Usually when I'll paint an apple, I'll go for more of an orange look in some spots. Maybe we can incorporate some of it here, but I skipped it because I wanted to put the right value kind of immediately. So just another thing to have in mind. for the area with the reflected light, I can definitely pour some yellow in there and see what happens. And now what I'm gonna do is, let's blend some edges if we can, because I waited way too long. Actually gonna use this one. I was curious to see how this one's gonna work for blending. Yeah, really nice, and I get a nice level of control over it, and the size helps too, so that's pretty cool. And then as we move on to the shadow, I'm gonna do a mix of orange and blue, just to keep things a little interesting. So it's gonna be blue close to the base of the apple. This brush is really fun. You can see the names on the large goat hair, this one. So these aren't synthetic. So this is really nice. And then as we move further from the center, I'm gonna orange things up a bit to maybe play around with the temperature, but I really like what this looks like here. And again, while it's still wet, let me spray a bit of water on it. We can start perhaps adding some more details. Let me go for a different one. So this was the small brown synthetic. Or maybe, yeah, let's get started with this one. Then I'll switch to a bit of a medium-sized one. What I like so far about these brushes, and I have shown them to you on some occasions, I just tend to be very slow in trying out new materials because I have so much and so many things to do, and I just enjoy painting, and I kind of stick with my habits. But the one thing I really liked about them, which is a huge plus, and let me get this kind of a darker section in the beveled part, which is a huge plus, is the ability to have a nicer grip, because these are bamboo, so they're uneven intentionally, and they're really light on like how you grab them, and they're uneven, so you won't develop this callus in a specific place. At least that's been my experience so far. I mean, it can happen, but for the most part, from what I noticed, it didn't happen to me, which is a big plus if you're holding a brush for a long time. It's actually a pretty important thing to have in mind. So yeah, and so I wonder, let's do something interesting. I'm gonna wet this area, and I'm gonna go, instead of lifting the reflected light that I've shown you earlier, I'm gonna paint around it and see what this ends up looking like. So kind of an interesting, bit of a different way of doing this. And you may lose some freshness, but I'm actually fine with that here. And then let me go ahead and connect that with the shape of the stem. Now you really want to get that curve right, so it goes around and really into that kind of a beveled shape. Now you shouldn't see it, so let me just lose some of that here. You see, like that. And I want to try, because I was way too slow on that section, I want to try injecting some yellow here, like that. Again, now the reason isn't to change the yellow, but rather to have an easier time blending. So this is something I'll do sometimes. Let me see here. I want to lift that back, but I still want to get this kind of a smoother transition. So I don't know, I think this looks really nice. This area here, I might have gone too dark. And let's try and fix that by going a little darker here. So instead of darkening what's too dark, we can darken another spot and kind of put the other part in context. So, and you see it's still wet, because I used a lot of water in the first wash, so it's actually still workable. And I sprayed a lot of water too. Now let's go for a bit of a larger brush, more water capacity, a bit of this blue, bit of red. By the way, the colors, yeah, I know, I always forget to mention, it's just it's like the recent demos: French Ultramarine, Perylene Red, and Indian Yellow. Okay, so hopefully that puts it in a nice context. I really like the way this looks, and I do plan on showing you a lot more of these brushes. So let's see here. Do I want to do something? I think what we'll do is I'll dry them with the hair dryer. We'll look at both results, and then we'll figure out if we want to make some corrections. So I'm actually going to be a little more determined with this one. Here's what we're going to do. I think I will further darken this area, believe it or not. I feel like the contrast isn't strong enough, and then I'll lead it into the cast shadow, which should also be darker, and kind of do it in an even way. So let's get to it. It's not going to be too complex, you'll see. I really just want to put kind of a layer on top of that. I'm going to start with some orange mixed for my Parylene red and my Indian yellow, and we'll see where it goes, okay? And I will get started with this beautiful kind of cast shadow here, like that, and then I can actually spray a bit of water, and this will help, and I've shown you this in a different video, it will help some areas to blend, but not all of them, so you won't get a completely blended result. So I'll start with this, and then as we move downwards, I'm going to add a bit more yellow and blue so that we can kind of green it up. I'm still going to keep this fairly secondary kind of palette. Let me show you. And let's blend some of these edges a little more here. And I'll come back with some very light paint just to have that kind of reflected light here. And I know it looks super dark, but it'll actually lighten up a bit. And if we messed it up, we messed it up, but so be it. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to connect it to a much darker and richer cast shadow, okay? So these are some of the challenges of working with color, and where I love this dry brush effect. Working with full color and also just generally working larger takes a bit more effort. Now this may seem too dark, and it very well might be. I can try, let's use like a harder sable kind of brush, Escoda, my normal Escoda, the Barocco, to see if we want to lift or kind of blend. Actually, you know what, I don't think it'll be necessary. I think we're good. So yeah, and as for the other one, I like how it turned out. Again, this one is better in my opinion, much better, just because I gave it more room and a bit more, let's spray water, that always enhances it, just because I gave it more room to develop. So I actually really like it. Now one last move we can do, which is going to be really fun, is to add a bit of a darker background right on top of the apple that you can actually see there, and that'll really make its shape pop. Okay, so that's kind of the final touch, if you will. And these brushes are fun, they're very soft. So let's do this. Tracy reached out to me a while ago, and he's been super professional with these, and they're handmade and just really high quality, so definitely recommend you check them out. I do have to mention that I'm getting a commission when you make a purchase through the website if you use my code, but you also get a discount, so that kind of works nicely. So let's spread out using a bit of a warmer value. I like doing that too, you know, the variation in the temperature of the shadows. And then as we move to the left side, we can kind of use a lighter value because we're not really aiming for any strong contrast or anything like that. It's kind of just a background, you know. So maybe something like this, keep it kind of loose. But that line really gives the apple hopefully some light and pop, and that works really well. So I hope you enjoyed these quick demos, and I hope they better show you perhaps how I approach this whole subject of just using wet on dry. You don't have to pre-wet everything, you don't have to do, you know, the whole, and I've shown you before, you don't want this demo to be too long, but, you know, this whole thing with the, let's see here. I'm gonna show you what not to do, so it take way too long to just show you what not to do, but hopefully, you know, pre-wet the whole thing. And I know some people enjoy that. If you enjoy it, do it. I mean, I'm not saying it's prohibited or anything like that. All I'm saying is that you could be utilizing watercolor perhaps in a more effective way. Okay, so instead of doing that and really having trouble with the control, and I do encourage you to get better at this technique, because sometimes you have to use it. Sometimes it's ideal to use it. I'm just saying that the use cases for this are way more than people actually think, which is why I recommend you become more of a master of that as well. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this one. Now let's wrap it up. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed seeing this process, both the two versions, the smaller one and the larger one. Had a really good time painting them, and I think this one really shows everything I love about this approach. Again, you want to train yourself to be able to recreate the different values you see in real time while maintaining flow. It's not easy, but I do think it's a skill that is worth it, and to be quite honest with you, I think it's a fundamental skill. It's at the core of pretty much every painting I make. Yes, not all processes will conform to this. Many processes require an underpainting and a quick wash before that, or they're just completely different. But for the ones that do call for this technique, very often it will be portraits too. I highly recommend you get better at it. And as a final note, do check out Tracy Lebenzon brushes at Lebenzon Brushes. I will put the links below. Coupon code Liron for 20% off. These are great, so comfortable, and so good for, like, if you're holding a brush for a long time. It's just super ergonomic, very comfy, especially the wider grip ones. Just really good. Highly recommend you check them out. And also don't forget to like this video, drop a comment if you can. It helps more people find the video, and I will talk to you again real soon.